Hello, phone fruits. I'll workshop it. Hello, little gay people in my phone, and welcome back to Lesbian Media Analysis Time. Today, we're talking about a phenomenon that has plagued the lesbian discourse airways for centuries, or 11 to 60 years, based on how much you personally care about the legalization of interracial or gay marriage, respectively. Swirl. The first time I ever got canceled on TikTok, it was for swirl allegations. Basically, I made this video pairing up sapphic celebrities into PR couples that I thought would permeate the zeitgeist, cause a little frenzy, get the gays excited. Mind you, this is like 2022.
I think it'd be hot. They both have similar brands with like the young, up-and-coming Hollywood vibe. Their aesthetics would be super cute together. Their photos would go viral. You can cast them in like a sapphic rom-com on Netflix. Like, it's a hit. You're welcome.
The notable ones I got called out for were Odessa Ozyon and Amanda Stenberg, Tessa Thompson and Audrey Plaza, Willow Smith and Hunter Schafer, and my magnum opus, Ice Spice and Ashnikko. Please, the world just wasn't ready. Aside from the fact, if you couldn't tell from the SpongeBob voice, that video was like a joke, I really did understand why a lot of black sapphics saw that and were like, what the hell is going on here? This is a lot of swirl. And they dragged me boots. And I don't want to talk about my wig. I don't want to talk about my wig, thank you. I don't want to talk about it. It got like classic internet toxic when it became looking into my personal dating history and speculating on who I'm sleeping with and a lot of odd parasocial things that famously come with getting reposted to twitter.com. But the backlash did still make me pause and reflect. And I'm happy to report it is not because I just love to date white people. This is a weird thing to address publicly, but for inquiring minds, my dating history is giving UN. Like, if I could get all of my situationships and exes in a room, the potluck would go crazy. But in the face of the backlash, I paused to reflect in the sense that this TikTok wasn't coming from a place of me pairing up couples that I, Bitnia, would personally gag to see. The pattern, while super obvious in hindsight and valid to critique, was not rooted in an affinity for swirl by virtue of my personal preference, but more so as a product of my own indoctrination. I'd put together pairings I thought would bode well in the public eye, be well received by the masses. That was my thought process when I put it together, and as someone who is famously really invested in pop culture and media analysis, it became clear to me that I had swallowed the swirl pill, ideologically, parasocially. And today, I want to investigate how it got into the water supply in the first place. Hi gay! Brief pause from the video for a quick word from our sponsor. And also, thank you, no, that's not it either. Thank you for 102,000 subscribers! We couldn't find another zero, so it's 102. So, fun fact about me, when I was looking for jobs, I was submitting to pretty much anywhere I could find, which unfortunately means that my information ended up in some pretty shady places. And to this day, I am getting calls from professionals who want to offer me a job on the spot after a 30-minute WhatsApp interview, and my credit card information. In the digital age, scammers are everywhere. But lucky for you, this video is sponsored by Aura, a service that helps you protect yourself online. Aura identifies data brokers selling your information, automatically requests removals, and keeps monitoring to make sure that your data stays off of those sites. They also offer dark web alerts, real-time fraud alerts, a VPN, password manager, and 24/7 identity monitoring. And if anything does happen, Aura offers up to $5 million in identity theft insurance with US-backed fraud experts available around the clock. You can try Aura for free for 14 days at aura.com/bitnia, and by then they will already be working to scrub your personal info off the internet. We should not be this exposed online, and we don't have to be, so go to aura.com/bitnia today and take some control back. Thanks so much to Aura for sponsoring today's video. And to clarify, this video will be primarily referring to interracial couples featuring a black or mixed with black partner and a white partner. But that's the baseline I'm using for swirl. When I think of an earnest, non-commercialized representation of an interracial lesbian relationship in media, I think of the incredibly true adventure of two girls in love. It is the sweetest queer film about, quite literally, what the title implies. 17-year-olds, small-town suburb, deep in lesbian love. It's a creative interpretation of the filmmaker Maria Magenti's first relationship, and it's just about young lesbian love in the face of, well, the 90s.
This story chose me because I also had an experience of falling in love for the first time with another girl, which was comic and tragic the way things are when you're 17.
It's a film with an indie vibe that came out in 1995, which famously was in a fantastic time for interracial love or lesbians, representation-wise, at least from what I'm told. I'm a 1. It's my read that she wanted this film to feel like an earnest representation of the sensation of being in love for the first time. But she also felt the weight of what this one film would mean for lesbian representation in a world that was paying us dust.
No one filmmaker can answer all of our questions about who we are or tell every story that we need to have told.
She wanted to make something that felt universal for lesbians, but was also aware she couldn't. But she tried. And I'd gander that's why the leading lovers present how they do. Randy is a white low-income butch, and Jane is a black femme rich girl. Magenti was trying to polarize their worlds, their life experiences. She contrasts them against each other to emphasize the purity of their love. Rich, poor, black, white, love is love, tale as old as time. And it didn't come from a boardroom or a screen test. It came from one filmmaker's genuine goal to earnestly reflect crazy, brazen, passionate love amidst a society that wants to destroy it. And I think at its root, that's the thing. Or at least that sentiment is cognitively why we see a lot of interracial lesbian media today. Putting things, not to be so literal, but literally in black and white is an easy way for a filmmaker to translate the theme of these two people come from different worlds but love each other so much despite it all to an audience. To jump way ahead for a second, think Netflix's First Kill that came out in 2022. One's a vampire and one's a monster hunter, and their families hate each other, but they simply can't resist one another.
I can't eat, sleep, or think straight unless we're together.
Notably, one is black and one is white. It's a thematic trope. They're emphasizing unity by signifying difference. The nuance in this is whether it's post-racial or not. Both The Incredibly True Adventure of Two Girls in Love and First Kill do not notably highlight, racism. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think every piece of media needs to acknowledge racism. Look at Bridgerton. I love Bridgerton. Both of these pieces of media are campy fun. They're super different, obviously, but the ethos of both of them is rooted in this escapist joy. They're not meant to be raw depictions of the interracial American queer experience. The issue with Swirl emerges when this nuance becomes exploited. I think somewhere along the way, there became this idea of killing two birds with one woke stone. I don't think it's a stretch to say typically queer white women are at least generally liberal, would post a black square in 2020 at the least. And so my theory is essentially, if a white lesbian filmmaker can get the backing, funding, distribution, and general support to make a lesbian film or add a lesbian love story into a TV show or make a lesbian TV show, they want it to feel widely representative. Because this is our chance, right? They greenlit the gay stuff, so let's just full send it. Send in a black girl with 3B curls. But that being said, there is an earnest way to depict interracial lesbian love, and I'd say those are the pieces of media I'm most drawn to. And that is what's missing in today's lesbian media schema, in my opinion. So to jump back into the ancient texts, if you were paying attention, you'd notice that Butch Randy is played by the one and only Laurel Holloman, who was famously Tina Kennard from The L Word, one half of infamous lesbian situationship, Bet and Tina from The L Word. The L Word originally aired from 2004 to 2009, and then had a short-lived reboot from 2019 to 2023. And despite it being a TV show literally dedicated to chronicling a rotating door of devastating and beautiful lesbian relationships, Bet and Tina are its heart. They are there the whole way through, whether we like it or not. Tina! Now, Jennifer Beals, who plays Bet, is famously passing by Nella Larson. That was a literary reference. Yes, that's right. I do not just scroll Twitter all day, I read. Actually, I'll expand on this. This is kind of relevant. Plus, it's Black History Month, so here's an aside. Basically, Passing by Nella Larson is a 1929 novel about two childhood friends, Claire and Irene. This is actually really ironic because I was introduced to this book in a Black studies context, not a queer context, but luckily for you, this book, coincidentally, is widely understood to be deeply thematically homoerotic. So yeah, basically, Irene is light-skinned and Claire is biracial, half black and half white. They grew up together as children, but end up leading very different lives as adults. Despite this, they always remain somewhat entangled. Irene marries a black man and lives within the black elite community in Harlem. Claire, on the other hand, passes. Despite being biracial, she marries a racist white man who is unaware of her mixed heritage and uses this privilege to assimilate into white spaces and essentially live under a guise. And throughout their entire lives, they're oddly fascinated by one another. It's a whole thing. You should read it. They did turn this book into a film in 2021 with Tessa Thompson. Should have been Jennifer Beals, to be honest. But I didn't watch it. Sound off down below if it's good. Yeah. Anyways, Bet as a character is interesting to analyze in a racial context because, like I said, famously, Jennifer Beals is passing by Nella Larson. But I do kind of respect what the writers tried to do here. Bet is a character who feels a strong tie to her blackness, despite the fact Nella Larson, yeah, you get it. And as early as season 1, there's a plot point introduced where Bet is adamant that she would like to use a black sperm donor as her and Tina prepare to have a baby. If you haven't seen The L Word, basically the show starts with them together, and having been together for like 7 years, chaos ensues. 2-decade-long co-parenting situationship, whatever. Anyways, Tina is like, no, I don't really want to have a black sperm donor. Now notice how that's a gag. Notice how that's actually really compelling and ripe for analysis. There's so many themes here. Bet wanting a black sperm donor has this nuance around racial pride, but also overcompensation in regards to her blackness. And there's also this essence of, is your baby mama racist? And does your baby mama even see you as black if she'd question why you want a black sperm donor? These are interesting questions. This is compelling writing. This is earnest queer storytelling. These characters feel three-dimensional. There's a cultural awareness imbued in them that translates that this piece of media is not simply about representation or love, but reality, life, discourse, nuance, racism. And I don't say that to say it's better than something like Two Girls in Love or First Kill, just that they serve different functions and race functions differently within them. And that's great. We need and deserve that variety in our media. Earlier, I said I respected the writer's strategy here because I'm sure in fucking 2003, it was not popular to be like, yeah, let's have the leading lady of the lesbian show be a black woman. And the L Word is famously very white, but I think the fact that as early as season 1, they introduced a plotline predicated on the interaction and relationship between race and queerness is really interesting, and I respect that. Like, that's good MFTV. Another cornerstone piece of queer media that does deeply investigate interracial lesbian relationships is The Watermelon Woman, written, directed, and starring prolific lesbian filmmaker Cheryl Dunye. Premiering in 1996, it is the first feature film to be directed by a black lesbian. It is somewhat autobiographical and follows protagonist Cheryl, a lesbian filmmaker, as she begins research on a documentary about a 1930s black performer known as the Watermelon Woman, and begins to investigate her lore and background. Cheryl's love interest in the film is a white woman named Diana, a relationship her best friend disapproves of, claiming that Cheryl wants to be white and her love interest has a fetish for black women.
She's got a nice bone structure if you're into white girls. Do you think she is or isn't in the family?
Only for Cheryl to discover in her research that the Watermelon Woman, Faye Richards, may have had an interracial lesbian relationship of her own. This piece feels true to itself. It feels documentative, self-aware, archival in a way. It is an honest and vulnerable depiction of the specific intersectional experience at a specific point in time. And it's an MF classic. But to jump back to the 2000s, the next fictional canonized lesbian couple to dominate pop culture was stumbled into more than it was strategically designed, but I think resonated for parallel reasons to Bet and Tina. And that is Brittany and Santana from Glee. I know I forgot to mention Santana in my Mean Lesbians video, and it was a devastating misstep for me as well.
Only straight I am a straight up bitch.
So this is my public apology. Also, I love you forever, Naya Rivera. Now, Glee is camp. Glee is intentionally a campy show. Now we're in 2009. The landscape around queerness is super different because the prevalence of media and technology is super different. Glee is widely credited with normalizing queerness and queer people in the mainstream. The L Word was groundbreaking in the sense that it was a cool, underground-esque, kind of taboo thing to watch, but it did have a lot of appeal. Glee was a cultural phenomenon, and it was also a piece of media that wasn't about queerness, but just heavily featured queer characters, notably Brittany and Santana. Now, Ryan Murphy, creator of Glee, is a white guy, and his writing is curt and toes lines often. All that to say, while Naya Rivera is Afro-Latina, Santana is not black, like in Ryan Murphy's head. He don't want to get into all that. He has his sassy black girl character, Mercedes. She handles all the plot lines and social nuances or teetering jokes as they pertain to blackness, and that's where the train stops for him as a writer. Nonetheless, Santana and Brittany are interracial, but they're not usually analyzed through that lens because that frankly isn't how they were written to be received. Which is kind of a good thing, as in Glee is definitely not a colorblind show by any means, and I don't think the intention was to emphasize the polarity between Brittany and Santana in a they come from two different worlds type of way. It's just that they weren't intentionally written from episode 1 to be endgame lesbian lovers. It's something the writers discovered about the characters as the show progressed. Glee's characters are all archetypes. That's the point. Tina is the Asian girl, Artie is the guy in the wheelchair, Brittany is the dumb blonde, and Santana is the mean lesbian. That's her thing. Race is pertinent to the show's structure, but Santana is somewhat deracialized as a character because the writing doesn't have room for intersectionality. All the characters have to grapple with their thing. Notice how Brittany doesn't even really have a coming out arc. She very seamlessly slides into her bisexuality in a way the narrative allows. And while Santana's tension around her queerness and coming out is contextualized by the cultural traditionalism of her Hispanic family, it seems a bit more circumstantial because like I said, the writers didn't initially create Santana's character with the intention of her being a lesbian. So Glee wrapped up in the mid-2010s, and again, we are now in a new cultural sphere for queerness. Now we have Instagram, Musical.ly even. Gay marriage is legal, and it's a new dawn, a new day for queer media. And around that time, we got the pivotal interracial lesbian show, The Fosters. The Fosters, which premiered in 2013, followed married couple Steph and Lena as they navigated life raising their 4 children. Classic soapy TV drama. This show was the type of thing me and my mom would mutually gag for. She's like, oh, to be a hardworking parent, and I'm like, oh, to be a moody teen, and also it was just insane. Insane things happened in this show. It was also a show that didn't shy away from race by any means, and the fact that Steph and Lena are interracial affects the plot and their relationship throughout the show's 5 seasons. This show was groundbreaking in the sense it was centered around a lesbian-led family unit, an earnest, albeit deeply dramatized and soapy, representation of a queer family, rooted in strife, love, and perseverance. And honestly, we don't talk about it enough, and I haven't seen something like it since. Like lesbian mom leads, I genuinely can't think of anything else. It introduced a totally different purview on lesbianism to the zeitgeist. I'm highlighting these 3 pieces to paint them as the building blocks. Their success was foundational to what would follow in the late 2010s and early 2020s. These were stories that didn't swirl for swirl's sake, but appeared to me at least to have swirled for the sake of providing multiple veins of representation at once, or circumstance. But the precedent they set basically told studios, oh, okay, this works. Let's do this then, all the time. And that they did. In the following years, we got their descendants. To name a few off the top of my head, easy on Netflix: San Junipero from Black Mirror, Euphoria, The Perfection, Get Even, Sense8, Beer Street Trilogy, I'm Not Okay With This, Dare Me, Never Have I Ever, Yellow Jackets, Willow, Time Cut, Jagged Mind, Prom, the musical, Bodies, 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 The Gossip Girl reboot, Riverdale, I Love LA, and tentatively, Bridgerton. These are all shows that aired between 2015 to present day that subtly or prominently feature a fictional sapphic relationship between a white woman and a black woman. Typically a mixed black woman, but that's honestly a whole different video, and I don't have the energy to do colorism today. But like, I'm sure you can infer. You're smart people. This list notably does not include sapphic interracial relationships between white women and a non-black person of color. For example, Love Lies Bleeding, Heartbreak High, Killing Eve, and Sex Lives of College Girls, which all feature white women and Asian women, or mixed Asian women. Different video, but I also think you can draw your own conclusions there. Obviously, I just listed a shit ton of media that features these relationships in completely different ways to completely different degrees that function within their respective narratives completely differently. A couple of these shows do feature their respective couple amidst a backdrop that is somewhat racially aware, albeit subtly. Easy on Netflix, an anthology series that went on for 3 seasons and follows a different couple every episode but revisits the same couples every season, follows Joe and Chase, and notably was the piece of media that I watched as a 17-year-old bisexual and went, oh, I think I just learned something about myself. When they're first introduced in season 1, the writers are playing with that polarity trope. Joe is vegan, and she rides bikes, and she canvasses around her neighborhood. She's an activist. Chase likes to Uber. Chase would rather be at a party than a community council meeting, and she loves her a bloody steak. Their initial episode follows Chase engaging in some silly antics to hide her flaws from Joe, until Joe inevitably finds out and is like, oh, I love you anyway, oh.
Chase. Chase! Where the fuck are you going, dude?
I'm leaving. I'm going to Jeezy's.
You can't just walk out of my art show like that. That's fucking embarrassing.
I loved this couple. I also love Kirstie Down and think she is such an underrated queer icon. I have not seen Miss Girl play a straight person since the Disney Channel original Cloud9, and even that is arguable, honestly.
Everybody's favorite daddy's girl.
All of Chase's friends are black, and most of Joe's friends are not, thus I think it's fair to say they're doing the polarity thing here in a way that is culturally aware without having to be a commentary on race. Mind you, this show aired in 2016 and wrapped in 2019, so I may even loop this in close to one of our foundational texts. Same with Riverdale, in a far campier context. But Cheryl and Tony are definitely a clear-cut example of they come from different worlds polarity trope. In contrast, there are pieces where, similar to Brittany and Santana, the couples are meant to mirror each other in some homoerotic way. Obviously, Brittany and Santana are both popular cheerleaders in the Glee Club who go to the same high school. They are different, but they are more alike than different, at least on the surface, which somewhat parallels something like Dare Me, a show that primarily follows 2 popular cheerleaders in high school who are best friends and have a deeply charged but somewhat resentful and competitive homoerotic relationship.
You think that she's gonna protect you? She won't. She does whatever she wants, and she takes and she takes. That's you, Beth. That's you.
Same with Get Even, where the popular head bitch in charge and her best friend and second in command also have a deeply homoerotic relationship.
I hate you. But I hate when you're not around.
Or The Perfection, a horror movie centered on 2 musical prodigies, one who had to give up her prowess and future to care for her sick mother, and the star pupil that rose to prominence in her absence.
What is it? What's happening? I don't fucking know. Things are fucking laughing.
The whole plot revolves around the idea of this rivalry and tension between the 2 that's further contextualized by the fact they are in fact boning. So this trope is another interpretation of this dynamic where things function somewhat colorblindly. These characters are meant to be the same, they mirror each other on the surface, so having them be different races is like, okay, sure, cute. Dare Me and Get Even came out in 2019 and 2020 respectively, and their raciality is shallow, and that's totally okay, but in a way that's definitely emanating out of a more socially progressive and media-dominant landscape and era, for better or for worse. Another aspect of this, and buckle up, this is a soapbox I've been waiting to sit on for a minute, is that there's also really limited media that depicts an interracial relationship where there's like racism. Like a piece of media that earnestly depicts racism occurring in a romantic relationship between a black woman and a white woman. The L word is one of the only things I can think of with Bet and Tina. Either it's sanitized and colorblind, or it's subtle, and the way race or racism impacts the relationship comes from outside of the relationship. But like racism is deeply pervasive and prevalent in society, fun fact, and white people who date black people, well-intentioned as any random person may be, are not exonerated from that. Sometimes harm happens. I've seen it happen. And the only piece of media I've seen highlight that experience in a centered, compelling, and creative way, even though it's literally its tiniest little moment, is Jordan Peele's Get Out. Get Out, which is a horror movie that premiered in 2017, follows Chris, a black man, as he visits his white girlfriend's suburban estate and meets her seemingly progressive white family for the first time. The type of white people who famously would have voted for Obama a third time if they could have. Spoiler alert, they are eugenicists and white supremacists who kidnap and psychologically enslave black people through hypnotism in order to literally wear their skin and elongate their lifespans. Yeah. But basically, there's this housekeeper, Georgina, who is like off-putting from jump. And once the twist is revealed, we discover Georgina is actually the white girlfriend's grandmother. Like they put her grandmother's mind in Georgina's body. And the white girlfriend is actually functionally a recruiter who grooms black partners with the sole intent of bringing them back to her family to brainwash them.
Where are those keys, Rose?
You know I can't give you the keys, right, babe?
And one of those partners was Georgina. Thus, this character is a sexually fluid white supremacist. And I think the inclusion of that detail, circumstantial as it may be, is such a subtly brilliant way of making a statement about how white queer people can present as allies only to be aligned and complicit in white supremacy. And I want a prequel also. Anyways, this brings us to Pigeonholing, which I feel is the real crux of the issue here. These are stories where not to be a right-wing propagandist, but it does feel like a little bit of DEI. A little bit of DEI. Adding in an interracial queer love story for what can feel like shits and giggles, or honestly no, for what can feel like pandering. These stories can feel like representation for representation's sake. Things that come to mind are Fabiola's first love interest from Never Have I Ever. The whole show is centered around this trio of besties who are all women of color, which never happened. So it did feel a little disingenuous to be like, ooh, here's a white mask, because equality. I will give them their flowers for it being an androgynous person as opposed to the femme for femme we usually get though. I clearly cannot shut up about this show, but the Gossip Girl reboot is another one. Oneida Hahn, the Blair Waldorf descended character, is an out black lesbian who, though she never has a meaningful love interest in the show, is also never coupled up with another black woman, which is one of the few black girls in this elite private school atmosphere could have been really interesting to explore in the narrative. Like, why does a lesbian who grew up how she did not want to date other black women? Compelling. But the writers don't touch it because that's not their point. There's this essence of swirl is safe, so let's just take it at face value. The Fear Street trilogy, which I love and think is super underrated, also does this. Another horror film, but at its core, it's a really beautifully crafted commentary on homophobia that initially takes place in the 90s and follows Dina and Sam, who begin the narrative as ex-girlfriends. Dina is played by Kiana Madeira, who is a mixed woman who had also aligned with the work of Miss Nella Larson's passing, but Dina's brother in the films is played by Benjamin Flores Jr., who is black, but not mixed, which gives to me like they wanted the protagonist to be ambiguous enough for the promotional materials to not give, this is a black story. But also they kind of imply she's black and just really light-skinned and wanted the benefits of that. And obviously this is not wrong. Maybe they're half siblings, it's never clarified. But also this is Ohio in the 90s. Homophobia is like super central here, but we're chill with black people? Genuine question. There's already a lot going on in these movies, so I'm not saying it's the biggest deal in the world, but it does feel a bit pigeonholed in there. Euphoria is another great example. Famously written by white cishet man, Sam Levinson, whose work consistently seeks to frame his own lived experiences inside characters who are young, queer women or black people in a way I've long found odd. And honestly, when season 3 comes out, you will most likely be hearing from me about this. But nonetheless, for such a raw and honest show depicting such intense subject matter, Levinson's interrogation of race, especially considering Rue is the main character, but also notably pretty much the only black woman character outside of her family, is really shallow. In a way that I think is more offensive to the construction of her character as a whole, more so than specifically in her romantic relationship with Jules, but still shallow altogether. It's sidestepped, it's circumstantial. The world of Euphoria is cruel and punishing, but outside of some elements of culture subtly imbued in the characters, it's post-racial in a way that doesn't feel like a creative choice, like in Bridgerton, which boldly and very intentionally takes place in a post-racial interpretation of Regency-era London, but more like a byproduct of Levinson's personal fear of going there. Despite the fact he's really willing to go there when it comes to transness, but I'm going down a rabbit hole. Anyways, the issue with this is not that all of a sudden it's bad to represent interracial relationships in media or to seek multiple avenues of representation in one piece of media. It's that this particular mode of lesbian representation is overrepresented. The amount of fictional American lesbian media that centers 2 black women, or 2 Asian women, or 2 Latino women falling in love is just non-comparable. And that is, stay with me here, a facet of capitalism. This kind of goes into what I was talking about in my Why Does Netflix Hate Lesbians video essay, in that streamers and studios are not convinced lesbian media will garner them a substantial return on investment. If a studio or a streamer is going to take a risk by doing something a little lesbian about the situation, especially in years post-2022 where we're experiencing this conservative backswing, it's most likely both of the characters will be white or we're going to Swirl City, because that is what has been proven to garner the most acclaim and profit. This whole phenomenon exists amidst the backdrop of nearly 3 decades of shifting social and political movements surrounding both race, misogyny, and queerness. It's not simple to disentangle, but it does paint an interesting picture when you look at how these relationships are depicted, how the characters are constructed or introduced, and what time periods these pieces of media are coming out. To zoom all the way out, there is definitely a take on this where representation politics are a vapid distraction tactic to divide people on arbitrary racial lines, while the 1% exploits all of our labor while pointing and laughing from their private islands while we slander each other on Twitter.com. But nonetheless, it's compelling to talk about, as long as there's an awareness that media representation is not the hill to die on. It's a symptom of a much crueler virus. Altogether, my point is not to advocate for or against swirl in media, just to look at it for what it is, how it's evolved, and what it means in a broader context. Art matters, media matters, representation matters, but the idea of our media being a facet of our liberation is oxymoronic. It contradicts itself. I don't know how much you're watching the news, but the media is low-key being run by the bourgeoisie. Fun fact. A newscaster feeding propaganda to the masses is still a newscaster feeding propaganda to the masses, even if said newscaster is black and gay. And while fictional stories can be beautiful, it feels amazing to see your experiences reflected on screen. That is because there are beautiful experiences in life. Not me saying life imitates art. Again, wow, this is the second time this has happened. To close us out, here is a list of lesbian media that features 2 sapphic women of color in love or entanglement. Pariah, Rafiki, Signature Move, The Half of It, Swarm, one of my favorite TV shows, want to do a whole video about that one, comment if you want it. Bottoms, Exo Kitty, Thelma, Saving Face, The Handmaiden, Set It Off, and the soon-to-be-released Girls Like Girls film directed by Hayley Kiyoko. Thank you for watching, gays, and I hope this leads to many lesbian movie nights and TV show binges that end in life-changing lesbian likes and profound homoerotic entanglements.